Nahmaduhu nusalli ala rasulihil kareem, amma ba'd. Dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have the pleasure of having Dr. Bilal Phillips with us. Dr. Bilal, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. It's my pleasure to be with you.
Jazakallah. Today we'll be talking about some of the common questions that non-Muslims ask us in our da'wah experiences. Some of the questions that they come across in these times when jihad and terrorism is the buzzword. Do you think these two concepts or these two ideas are one and the same?
Of course, they're not. Terrorism, of course, even terrorism itself has its own complexities. You know, as we say, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. You know, and if we use the definitions of terrorism, which were put out by, certain governments, it would include the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and all the major revolts that ended up in establishing democracy and things like this in other countries. So the whole issue of terrorism is something quite relative anyway. And jihad, again, is something else. Though people who may be involved in what we could agree on as acts of terrorism may use the term jihad to justify it, that doesn't make it jihad in and of itself either. Whereas jihad is in fact a struggle against evil, whether it is with an individual or within his family, his community, or it could be a state struggling against evil, the evil of another state. And it may involve arms, it may involve writing, it may involve speaking, etc. So jihad has many, many facets to it. So it's really unfair and incorrect, for the media to mix these two terms together and create a kind of a hodgepodge idea of, terrorist, jihadist, kind of mix.
How can a person clearly identify that what is jihad and what is a clear act of terrorism? How do you know that in a particular area what is going on?
Well, sometimes it may not be possible, because from a distance, if you're not in control of the media, others are creating the news, then you are subject to whatever image that they portray. But if a person does have access to actual information about what is going on, then we can say that some acts of terrorism, which involve killing of innocents, people who are not involved in any kind of military struggle, children, women, etc., blowing them up, murdering them as a means of terrorizing a society. These are acts which Islam doesn't condone under any label. Where the need arises, it is not the title for any struggle. We have no holy wars. We have just and unjust struggles. A just struggle, which may involve military means, etc., where the struggle is for the sake of God, for the sake of Allah, that can be defined as jihad or an aspect of jihad. Whereas fights, struggles, etc., which are for nationalist, tribalist, political interests, which have nothing to do with Islam, though they may be labeled as jihad struggles or jihadist struggles, the people involved are called jihadists. This is not, from the Islamic perspective, jihad.
Now the media creates images, and it seems Muslims are losing this war against the media. What do you think is the solution to this problem that we are in?
Well, the only way around this is for Muslims to develop independent media. Channels like Al Jazeera and others that are coming up now, where the other side of the picture is being presented to certain degrees. This is what needs to be done. Muslims should have had satellite stations, decades ago, which would express and would explain what their positions are, what their struggles are involved in, etc. But as long as the media doesn't remain in our hands or doesn't get into our hands, we don't take an active part in utilizing the media to portray our own causes, then we will always be subject to the, the whims of Western or Eastern or, non-Muslim media.
As you are aware, Sheikh, that a lot of our programs are telecast on the satellite channels, and we know the cost involved in setting up a channel. We've been trying to do that. Now, it's a huge cost. What message would you like to give to the Muslim brothers and sisters around the world as far as their responsibility towards setting up a good Islamic channel?
Well, as I said, it is something which should have been done decades ago. And really, there should be positive support for all such efforts. And whether it's with the IRF efforts, there are other efforts being done elsewhere in the UK. There's Islam Channel, and in the US and Canada and other parts of the Muslim world now, people are becoming more and more aware of the need to develop our own expressions, channels of expression through the media. And it is our duty really to be actively involved in such efforts because of the fact that our future and our cause and our existence to a large degree depends on being able to accurately present the picture of Islam, its teachings, its aspirations, so that people will understand that Islam is not a threat. Actually, Islam has the solution that people are looking for all over the world to many of the problems that they currently face. It is not a threat, as the media tends to portray it as this has now replaced communism, as communism was a threat back in the 50s and 60s. Now this has now been replaced by Islam. This is the next threat, And even surveys done in places like the US show that the majority of the population feel that, yes, Muslim rights should be curtailed. Things like this, which is, shocking, we think of in a democracy where people are considering curtailing the rights of some of its citizens, simply because of their religion. So we have a great need for our own media to express the truth about Islam to the world.
Talking about satellite channels and so on, a lot of non-Muslims have now access to visuals of the Kaaba, the Hajj, Tawaf, Taraweeh and so on. And they are thrilled to see the numbers worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the holy city of Makkah. What they come back and ask us that why are only Muslims privileged to visit Makkah? Why are we not allowed to enter this holy city? How do we respond to that?
Well, we clarify for them that it is not a place of tourism. Naturally, tourist spots, everybody wants to go and visit the tourist spots, the temples and the pyramids, and these are spots of tourism. Whereas Mecca represents a sanctuary for Islam and the worship of the one God. So those who are coming there should be coming for that same purpose. If people are coming for tourism, that is going to interfere with the religious activities and the rites, etc. People will not be able to perform their rites properly with people coming in and snapping shots and, as tourists do, and we know what happens to places when tourism comes there. It corrupts it also, So to keep the place clean and pure for worship, then it has been restricted only to Muslims. And as every society and every organization has its own sanctuaries, where only members who carry special identification or whatever are allowed in, we can look at it in a similar light. Whereas mosques around the world are open. People can come and see mosques anywhere in the Muslim world. But at least we have two sanctuaries, Mecca and Medina, which are restricted just to Muslims to keep it free of a lot of the crass materialism that tends to come into places that have been designated as tourist sites.
Another question right on top of the minds of non-Muslims is that Islam promotes forcible conversions. It was spread at the point of the sword and so on. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think history proves otherwise. Where we find that the largest Muslim country in the world today, Indonesia, with some 200 plus million Muslims, never saw any Muslim soldiers. I say that speaks for itself. With the fact that Muslims ruled India for 1,000 years, if it was conversion by the sword, there would not have remained a single Hindu in India. Muslims ruled Spain for 700 years. Were it conversion by the sword, there would not have remained a single Christian in Spain. And Christians have lived, and Jews and others have lived side by side with Muslims in many places, in Yemen, in Palestine, in North Africa, in many, many countries. They've lived side by side without any problems, without being, forcibly converted. And if we consider that today in America, between 300 and 400 people are accepting Islam daily, according to University of Chicago, Michigan, calculations of Dr. Yvonne Haddad and Dr. Ihsan Bagbi, they concluded that there was approximately between 300 and 400 convert daily to Islam. Where are the swords? Where are the guns and etc.? No, it is Christianity actually that where the Pope about 3-4 years ago made a public apology to humankind for the forcible conversions done, back in the 15th century, 16th century, etc., when the conquistadors left Spain and Portugal and these areas and went out and were forcing people into the religion. They have that history, but Islam doesn't have that history.
Pleased with book.
From human rights, let's move on to women rights in Islam. And a lot of questions are posed in terms of limited or no rights for women and so on. They say that you subjugate your women by putting them behind the wheel. How do you answer to that, or how do we justify the wheel and the subjugation and so on?
Well, I would say briefly that the veiling of women is not subjugation at all. The nuns, who are practicing traditional Catholicism, who wear the veil, nobody is forcing them to wear these veils. They have chosen to wear these veils. And they will tell you that it liberates them in the same way that for the Muslim world in general, the veil liberates the woman. She is not as caught up in the fashion and the need to, beautify herself to a T every time she steps out of her house. She's free. She can get up in the morning and just cover herself and step out, without having to go through all of these changes that the fashion industry has enslaved her with. So she actually frees herself from that enslavement, with the veil. And in any case, Allah has explained in the Quran the purpose of the veil. And it's not something which Muslims have culturally pushed on the women, but it's something which God has ordained, God has prescribed. When He said, يُدْنِينَ عَلَيْهِنَّ مِنْ جَلَابِيبِهِنَّ ذَلِكَ أَدْنَى أَنْ يُعْرَفْنَ وَلَا يُؤْذَيْنَ, that they should put their outer garments over themselves, drape it over themselves, in order to be known and not harmed. To be known in the sense of a chaste woman, a woman who is modest, who is not interested in the advances, flirtation, etc., which may come from males. That she is a woman who only functions in an honorable manner. If a person is interested in marriage, they must go to her father or her brother. They don't try to approach her directly. Just as a nun wearing her habit is known in the society, this is the person you don't approach, amorously. You don't try to hit on her, as we say in the West, right? She's not going to marry you, forget it, So similarly, when a woman wears the veil, she's making that fashion statement. As everybody who wears some kind of a dress is making a statement. The policeman wears his uniform, so you know who he is. The engineer on the construction site, he has a particular uniform, you know who he is. The doctor in the hospital, he wears a uniform, you know who he is. This is so that he's known, right? So on one hand, it is for her to be known, and the other hand, for her not to be harmed. Because by draping garments over herself, she hides her charms which are naturally attractive to males. And if these are not hidden and these are exposed, then the consequence is that she comes under attack. And that is natural in all societies. Males, are attracted to females. And males tend to be the aggressive ones. A woman may be attracted to a male, but the male doesn't have to worry about being attacked by a woman. But a woman who attracts a male, then she does have to worry about being attacked by a man, because we've seen the rates in rape and molestation of women rise dramatically over the last century. In which women have basically been unclothed. From the early 1900s, where women around the world were covered up. Non-Muslim women were covered up. Till now, where they're virtually naked, in television, in the beaches, etc. And we see a corresponding rise in rape. And even societies, because some people raise objections. Look, Muslims, they want to separate the men from the women, for example. In a Muslim society, you'll have a different bus for men or bus for women. Or in the bus, it's divided, a section for women, section for men, separating them. One could say, okay, look, Muslims, they're not giving women a chance to sit freely. But in both Bangkok and Tokyo, where people are jammed on buses, jammed into the bullet trains in Tokyo, the women complained so much that the government was forced to provide separate carriages for women and separate ones for men in order to protect the women. So this idea of veiling and separation, this is to protect women. It is for their interest. It is not to oppress them. Because behind the veil, the woman is free to express herself, her own interests, etc., as we can see in developed Muslim countries where women are involved on the highest of levels within the society.
You mentioned about the veil helping protect the woman from rape and molestation and so on. But the psychologists say that essentially the problem in a rape is with the men rather than the woman, because it's the sickness in the mind of the man which leads him to a rape. And if that sickness is there, he could even rape someone who's veiled. So how do we respond to these questions?
Well, this is a theoretical point. That, yes, the person who has that desire, regardless of the circumstance, he may still commit the act. But practically speaking, if a woman is virtually naked in front of him, his desire is now raised up far higher than a woman who's completely covered. So to say that, yes, it's a problem with the man, and we say, okay, let's just punish the men, that's not taking into account the reality that women also, depending on how they dress, encourage and increase that desire. So Islam says we must have a balanced situation here. Yes, the problem is with the men, and that's why the punishment for rape is so severe in Islam. If a person commits rape and uses a weapon, they're executed. That's a very severe punishment, very severe. Your life is lost, okay? But on the other hand, it says, okay, so women, you should cover yourself so as not to incite this individual, so that when this person's life is taken, it's because he has no excuse. He has no excuse. So it is finding the balance.
Another question that we normally face is that why is, first of all, polygyny allowed in Islam? If a man can have more than one wife, why cannot then a woman have more than one husband? So how do you explain the whole situation?
Well, that point is usually raised by feminists. Anthropologists clearly understand why this is not the case, because anthropologists who always compare human behavior with animal behavior, we just don't find polyandry in the animal kingdom, because the ruling figure is the male figure, and women and the females attach themselves to the male. So there's a natural tendency that polygamy is only found in the male, single male, multiple female format. As to single female, multiple male, this is something rare, abnormal. I mean, if we go around the world, through history, go back in ancient times, in ancient civilizations, in primitive civilizations, wherever you go in the world, all you find is polygyny, men having more than one woman. Why is that? Is it that, there is this unfairness everywhere, or is it a natural consequence of the natural way and that human beings are created, that males have these tendencies, they have the strength, they have the authority, that's the format it falls under? The reality is that it's natural. It's a natural tendency which God has created human beings with because of the fact that He has put in women certain emotions, etc. He has created a situation where their numbers outnumber the men, whether it's because women live longer, men are killed in the wars, and all these other different factors. The norm is that there is a surplus of women in the society. So for a woman now to marry 4 men, she is not solving any problems. She's increasing the problem because she's taken 4 men out of circulation, right? Besides, you have the other problems of a child naturally wanting to know who the father is, and no child will be comfortable with the idea of the mother, telling him or her that your father is one of these men. I'm not sure which one. This just doesn't work, And besides, a number of other factors where a woman is pregnant and, even from a procreational perspective, that societies that become strong are the ones that are able to procreate, increase its numbers of new members, right? So if you have a woman with 4 men, 4 men can only impregnate 1 woman, right? But if you have a man with 4 women, that 1 man can impregnate 4 women. So in that one pregnancy, in the polyandry format, only 1 child is produced. In the other, 4 children are produced. So even from a natural selection perspective, if we want to go from a Darwinian outlook, the polygamy is going to be favored over polyandry, the female with more than 1 male.
Sheikh, the discussion is taking a very interesting turn, but we have very limited time. Inshallah, we'll take this discussion forward in the next episode. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll have to conclude this time. Jazakallahu khair wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.